Thanks. Thank you all for being here. It's just fascinating as I sit through all of these other sessions and think about what we're going to be presenting today. To see how far we've gone. I go to these events and I see myself as one of those young people that was talking about data 30 years ago, and everybody kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And now I find myself 30 years later, and I feel like I'm the old guy in the room, and there's people talking about things that I didn't even envision. But it's interesting, and one of the really overarching takeaways that I've had just the first day I had here, and Whitey, you and I were talking about this before, is I think we all have to step back for a second and recognize that those of us who are here who have made the effort to come to this conference, it was mentioned in the last session, we represent a rather unique cream of the crop in the sense that we've embraced technology and we've made it a part of our day-to-day and running our operation. And I firmly believe that it's setting us up for present and future success. But one of the things that I always have done as a researcher is I can't rely on just what I think. I have to rely on what I learn and what I hear from the customer. And sometimes, a lot of times, especially in these days of such divisive perspectives, and we know it, we survey a representative sample of American consumers every month on their attitudes and everything from golf to politics. You got to really understand that we aren't necessarily the customer. And that's one thing that we really sought to find out when we got this presentation was what's the reality? How do we leverage that reality to continue to move forward with technology as we are, but at the same time recognize that not everybody runs with us as quickly as we want to. So I always like to start my presentations with what I call 2-minute takeaways. And we're doing it a little bit differently this time because I've got 2 images that in a sense, in a couple of minutes, are going to basically set us up for everything we're going to be talking about today. This is what you need to kind of think about. I challenge my art director to kind of do this, from a visual standpoint. We're at a real inflection point in terms of the adoption and diffusion of technology in the golf space. And I want to look at it from 2 perspectives today. I want to look at it from the owner's perspective, and White certainly is going to offer a lot of very good boots on the ground perspective on that. And I also want to look at it from the consumer side. But from the operator side, the little gentleman on the right, that's you guys. That's the golf facility operator, and you see this avalanche coming down the stairs. Yeah. At this conference alone, the guy on the left said there's 60 different tee sheet providers that are out there. You are getting barraged in every possible direction that there are these great magic bullets that are going to transform your operation, whether it's from the standpoint of gamified ranges or FP systems, or tee sheets, or software that manages every aspect of your operation. And as I've said in a number of different presentations, I feel like I say this all the time, but maybe it's fresh for you guys. If I had $10 every time I saw the letters AI, I would have retired 20 years ago. It's become like Xerox. It's generic. What does it really mean? In some ways, we've been using it for 25 years. But at the same time, you're getting barraged. And everybody's hitting you up with this. And it's disconnected. It doesn't always talk to each other. And for some of us, not necessarily those in this room, as you're going to see, it's pretty scary. So I want you to keep that in mind. But on the other side, you've got a customer. And you got a customer who is in a place right now that I call a place of dichotomous demand. If you look at this image, this is your customer, but your customer is very different depending on who he or she is. On the left-hand side, you've got the digital native who's looking for that frictionless experience, that doesn't want to talk to anybody, that books his tee time on his phone, shows up, checks in on a kiosk, goes to the first tee, orders that to be off his phone, gets his yardages from the GPS system and doesn't want to talk to anybody but the guys in his course. On the other side, you've got guys a little older than me, I think, not much older, who are standing on that bag of money, right? That's 75% of the demand in the marketplace. He's reaching out for you. He still wants that high touch rather than a high tech. He still wants to be able to know that he's important and is cared for, has somebody that has his back. And this is the guy that drives me crazy because I was there before. This is the guy who calls me on the phone 15 times a day instead of just text me or put something in a Slack group. Fact of the matter is, the world out there isn't just everybody at this conference. And we've got to take a good look at who our customers are, who our staff is, what our facilities culture is, to find the right mix. And we're going to go look at that in the next several minutes. Whitey's going to, put some perspective because, getting to know him, and probably most of you who are at this conference, it's sometimes hard to remember that there's still that guy on the right. I'm not here to, be the doomsayer or throw cold water on everything. I'm a huge person that's embraced technology. Again, I wish we were where we are today when I first got into this business 30 years ago. It was like pushing rocks up that hill to get people to listen to me when we did segmentations in the golf market, when we talked about the price elasticity studies. Thankfully, in the 17 plus years that I've run this company, I've had a chance to finally see people move in that direction, but it wasn't easy. And the thing that you've got to still remember, again, as others have said, is that this is an industry that's very slow to adopt. Before I go into some of the data that supports this, because that's it, that's the essence of what our research and what our insight is finding. Understand the environment you are in and make sure that you're adopting and using technology in a way that's right for who you are dealing with. I want to turn to Whitey for a second to kind of give this overview.
No, I don't have anything to add, but I think the data coming up is really key here. So
let's dive into it. So for those of you who read the Golf Business Pulse report, the 25 edition, which we released in the spring, and I'm so happy to partner with the COA on. So please, an honor to be able to support you on that. As you know, we talked to a representative sample of facility owners. That means that you guys are probably on the far right side of the bell curve when it comes to tech adoption. So what we find is that owners are moving towards technology, and they need to. I think there was a comment that somebody made at the end of the last session that a rising tide lifts all boats. And I applaud that. I think that's really important for you to do. I've been so concerned about what this data suggests because I don't want people to misinterpret it to suggest that we need to go backwards. We know we're going backwards. We've got to take people with us, but we've got to understand where we sit. And on the good side, one of the things that we're seeing is that technology is transforming operations. And this slide, which comes from the Golf Business Pulse study, shows over the last 3 years that we've seen some pretty strong adoption of a variety of different tech stack solutions in golf facilities. To the point that a number of these are almost ubiquitous. I don't read slides, so I'm not going to go through it. You can see it. I know this will be available for everybody. But there's a lot of stuff that people are using and that people are, for the most part, at least on the right-hand side of the slide, using at a much greater clip and capacity than they have over the last 3 years. It's something we want to continue to pace, to track as we go through the study. And Whitey, I know that you've been really involved in kind of taking the lead on some of this, and even beyond this, on the agronomic side.
I look at the technology. This is all forward-facing, to the customer, what they're seeing. But my facility, we're seeing we have a cost of goods sold software that we implemented, and my controller saved $70,000 in just the cost of goods sold, and making the food and beverage staff actually stick to it and put the items in there. $70,000 in 1 year this year, and that was one software application. We're putting in a driving range, or autonomous driving range, picker and a mower. Those things are dumping into a bucket that's going to blow it into a dispenser, then a washer, and then a dispenser, all automatically. You just flip the switch. So that's overwhelming. We're putting that in now, but then we're also signing this week for 16 autonomous mowers. We're going to go full tilt on picking the whole golf course, getting rid of my rotary motors and my fairway mowers, my real mowers, everything but the greens mowers. So they're not even on this list. But it's there's so many changes coming down, and I feel extremely confident in it that
and
continues.
And on the agronomic side, which we do include in this particular analysis here, you're right on the mark. I mean, autonomous mowers and just the whole push that we've had towards understanding how to more efficiently create unirrigated areas. The tools that are out there that help look at that are really significant. We are hearing, though, in a lot of data that for some of the facilities that probably benefit the most, it's still pricey, and there's still some real challenges for some to adopt that. So that, I think, is going to be a real major sea change that we will hopefully see in the new data when we collect it, that the industry is beginning to address. I want to turn into, again, my favorite two letters. And two letters that just haunt me. I mean, they're my secret. You have any question before we go on?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but if you go back, ChatGPT launched November 2022. Are you guys tracking adoption for that as well?
We are. I don't have it on this particular slide, but we've been tracking it in other venues, some of the other work that we've done, and we track this for a lot of different user sectors. So yes, and I'd be happy to chat more with you about that unintended on the side, because there's just a lot going on there that I think is worth doing. But this slide was really interesting. I know when Whitey and I were talking about it, we were kind of amazed as well. On the one side, we're seeing things go in the right direction. But if you look at the overall base of facility owners, you can see that there is greater agreement, but there's still a fairly large percentage of people that haven't yet fully bought into it, that haven't fully bought into the importance of this. And, that again should amaze everybody in this room, right? Because, we probably all bought into it already. But this is the environment we're working in. Now, again, there's some positive signs to it. There's growing interest. This slide, where we asked about the impact of it, some of the initial studies that we looked at, most people saw AI being more impactful in back office operations. Not, it's starting to shift, as you can see in the two most recent years of data here, towards a little bit more of a recognition that this can serve in customer-facing aspects as well. And then the quote there I thought was kind of interesting, just to see, representatively of what people are saying. Another theme that emerges from this data is the whole aspect of integration. That got brought up last time. We talked about this a lot. We have a lot to say about this. But take a look at what we're hearing in terms of just the frustration levels to some degree that with this proliferation of software out there, they're not communicating with each other. Not 2/3 agree that there's a really acute need for greater integration. Almost 6 in 10 agreeing that it's too time intensive for them and their staffs to learn. There's a real opportunity for those that can actually find things together.
And I think we saw that yesterday with that presentation with the satellite imaging. And how would that be? It would be so damn easy for that image to be downloaded to a fertilizer spreader. So it goes right to your box and it adjusts the fertilizer spreader as it goes around the course and saves you maybe 10-20% on your fertilizer rate for your over fertilizing and under fertilizing. And also could go to Toro, NSN, and or Rainbird or Hunter control devices and control your water. In Colorado, you control 10% of your water rate, you're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars, in water usage and power. So more direct, input from if they talk to each other. Well, that's something that's coming, and I think it's going to be.
So you're saying, what if this is not something you're saying, this is what they're doing, we should look at this information, you're saying, what if we did this?
Yeah, and I think John's saying that it's a frustration.
Yeah.
It's a frustration point with everybody in this room with the technologies. They're not talking, everything's too unique. It's not talking to each other well enough yet.
It's the holy grail. When that, I know there's plenty of folks out there that say they figured it out already, but when someone really does figure it out, you're going to see a quantum leap in terms of the impact. Yes.
We're going through all these new technologies have tremendous research and startup costs. And these companies are trying to recoup those costs as best as they can. Most of them have APIs that could be integrated with other things, but overall in operations, at what cost are you willing to spend on an annual basis to integrate all of this? And more importantly, where the hell are you going to find all the personnel that will be capable?
And we're hearing that too. I mean, I've got some folks that are going to come out, I think, on the next slide. So that, and we've done a lot of interviews and research, one-on-one research with facility owners and superintendents, and that's a major point. Because going back to my earlier statement, I'm going to show you the consumer side in just a minute. If you're trying to free up staff to be there for the customer in a way, meet them where they are, who's running this? Who's taking the time to go through it? We see a lot of frustration amongst the people we talk to about their inability to harness it. So I'm not suggesting by any means that this means stop. It just means that this is a real opportunity that someone's got to figure out a way to make this more streamlined. And that's, you know, I say grasping for balance on this particular slide. Whether it's, you know, from a consumer facing standpoint or even what you do back office, there's a real understanding that this whole high tech versus high touch dilemma, I'm going to show you a really couple fascinating slides on the consumer side, that's something that has caused some kind of concern and consternation amongst some of your fellow members. You know, whether it's losing connection with best customers or being able to provide that service, this search for balance is really something that we've got to be mindful of. Pardon?
Hey, John, can you go back to the last slide for me and explain the last line, which,
The 2/3 of course owners.
yeah, kind of seems to be counterintuitive.
So what it simply means is that 2/3 of owners believe that the overall net impact of automation is positive, but it was higher a couple of years ago, which I interpret to be not significantly higher, but directionally higher, which makes me feel that we're kind of stuck and not yet at a point where we've integrated and found that solution. That's where I think my takeaway. Let's talk about, though, gamified ratings, something that obviously is a big topic and has been a real boom for golf facilities, talking about another application of technology. And certainly that has become more prevalent. That's from the work that we've done with your members, 34% report having simulators for screen golf. A majority believe, though, that we're approaching saturation. And you can see, you know, the growth and adoption on the slide on the curve on the bottom about having an enhanced practice range. But just like everything, you know, I talk frequently about how we need to be hyper local, how we evaluate where things are going. I mean, we capture data on a national basis, we capture it on a regional basis, and I maintain you've got to capture it even on a hyper local basis because, you know, I live where I live in Westchester County, New York, and my club just brought in, you know, a bunch of trackmen, and we've got 3 days in our facility that we use. And there's 3 different off-course facilities within a 10-mile radius of us. Now, we're not the only game in town, but there's a lot of others, and I've got a question that's, you know, whether saturation could be if it's there. That said, the early adopters, hopefully most of you are among them, have seen huge benefits in gamifying their ratings. Why do you think you've got a thought to that?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot, you know, everybody's been talking to, everybody knows somebody to put in a top tracer, right? And the gamification of what it's brought. I've been keeping track, talking to half a dozen of them a year or more. Hey, what's your revenue like? Is it no longer a, you know, just a pop in the skittle? Is it a blast? And it's looking to me like it's still lasting, and it's bringing a new found revenue to the ranges and different golf courses, green grass. And I think there are a lot of saturation is going to be met with the inline malls where where you're having a lot of gamification ranges and everything. I think those are going to be more hit and miss. I think it's going to be more solid.
Yeah, and that's an invitation and an opportunity for all of you because you are golf. You know, some of these standalone locations, obviously, a lot of the growth and the interest, depending upon how you define a golfer, we can talk about that forever. You know, as an industry advocate, I'm going to go out there with the 28 million number and talk about how the game is vital. But at the same time, I'm going to look at the fact that we talk about the people standing on that bag of money and the big, you know, the preponderance of where it's being spent. That's a much smaller number, but it's a more dedicated number. You have a chance to bring those dedicated customers, bring those people who are newer entrants in the market that are looking for more of these democratized experiences and provide it in an environment that's more customer friendly and more golf centric. That I think is a real opportunity for you.
So I got a question. So do you have any data that you're alluding to, which I agree with you, is the saturation rate on these ranges and all that?
Yeah.
And with the golf course industry itself, how many golfers, how many people do you need within a geographical area to support a golf course? You know, like any business that you go into,
Correct.
supply and demand, you know, is there a demand in that particular market? And do you have any data on what that saturation is like? You know, how many in the particular population
I
able to
find
support or things like that?
we would probably be best to look at that on a very hyper local basis in each geography. To look at it nationally, I think would be somewhat underwhelming in the sense that you've got to look at it within a particular region. Because, like I said, and I'm just guessing, you know, from where I live, I'm suspecting that we are at saturation or getting close to it, but that may not be the case out in Colorado. It may not be the case simulate.
That information would be very helpful though, right? If
Oh, it'd be
we-
hugely helpful.
Break that.
And I would love for somebody to commission us to do that. But it's a concept. To do it right, we would have to really dig into it on a regional basis.
In the last paragraph, in terms of simulators, if I went to a rooftop bar and 12 simulators on a Saturday, it wasn't that busy. But how does that compare to a golf course with green grass? Is that same top tracer and the gamification there? Is that feeling the same saturation and the same effects as the inline field or the rooftop
Yeah,
field?
it's right to that hyper local point. I mean, you gotta understand, and I think, and I talked about this in other things, we obviously do our monthly barometer study. It looks at leisure and golf in context with all of leisure. Thankfully, something I said 30 years ago is finally being embraced now, and that's our competition isn't just the other facility down the street. It's whether somebody's gonna go and decide to spend money going to a theme park or go to a movie, which no one goes to anymore. And we were theater owner operators, and boy, that was a depressing study to do. Whether it's sporting events, which we do a lot of, the biggest commodity right now for the target segments that we tend to gravitate towards in golf is time and the allocation of that time. We've got a whole other set of presentations from an economic standpoint. But we're lucky in that, we're sitting on top of a marketplace that is still continuing to spend quite aggressively despite a lot of economic headwinds. Again, I'm happy to digress and talk about K-shaped economies, which we're in. I'm happy to digress and talk about the fact that we are in year 2 of the largest intergenerational wealth transfer in the history of our country, which has got people spending it forward. And I can talk about all the credit card debt data that are out there. So you got a lot of people that are paying it forward. And the good news is that from a discretionary spending standpoint, golf's in a relatively good place.
Do you guys see any indication, like Topsol, their revenues are up 64% year to date? You see the same type of effect because that's what brought golf selling from Korea here.
Right.
Because they hit the wall. And they had to look for new revenue streams, and they thought bringing simulators, screen golf to the United States would be gigantic, which it has been
Yes.
to a degree so far.
But they're doing it a different way. And again, operations are doing it a different way too. Again, I could talk for a long time, we spent a lot of time with both of those environments. You can look at, I'll use one quick thought before we go to the consumer side, and that is when you think about the operating model that Topgolf was built on, it was largely FME driven. And that's where the expertise, where the operational talent was initially coming from. True's done a really super job, I think, here in the US with what they've done with Boston Social. Again, further conversation. There's a little bit of bias in that too, just given, that we've got friends at Trim, they look at how they're doing things. So let's turn to the golfer side, because this, to me, this is fresh. This is data that we collected literally 3 weeks ago. But, talking with folks at NGCOA, we wanted to get a feel now from an advanced standpoint about what is it that consumers are really demanding in terms of their use of that. Because again, you can put in all these systems, you can put in all this frictionless delivery of your service, but if the customer's not going to gravitate to it, that's a challenge. And like I said in the opening slide, you've got a very dichotomous situation. And I was blown out by this. I couldn't believe when we ran this, we basically asked the question about, do you want to proceed directly to the first tee rather than having to check in? You want that high-tech experience. And, if we asked everybody kind of anecdotally in this room, because we all buy into the tech, we would probably be surprised at some of these results, right, Wade?
We should agree on that. Our King Supers on the road had free self-checkout lanes 10 years ago, and now there's 20 or more, and everybody's gravitating towards it. So, you got the high touch, which is only 10% of golfers age 65 plus, that age group. And I look at that as it's a social outlet, and they want to come in and visit, and they want to see the faces. I got away from our course quite a bit this summer. When I came back, it was like, everybody was asking me, where the hell have you been for the last 2 or 3 months? We haven't seen, I got that 3 times a day when I'm in there. It's like, God, I didn't die, relax. But it was that they're coming to see a face at that point, and that was a certain segment of that, and it was the 65 and 8, roughly that age group. And then there's the other group that they're on, they're doing their Zoom calls all damn day. They don't want to see and talk and visit and ask how my weekend is going and all this and that. They want to go right to the number 1 tee. I find this,
Yeah, we were talking earlier, it's funny, I can go back to one of the other golf 2020 conferences when Susan Reed from Golf for Women and I were talking, and we were presenting kind of, this is more gender driven, right? Like how do guys and gals experience golf and the whole social side of it? And it was right where you were saying, like, the women, like, Susan played the wife of mine, and she's like, oh, did you hear about these guys are having marital problems and what's going on? No, we're playing golf. Yeah. So you got to think about what that level of interaction is desired in each facility.
So where are we going with this? I mean, just, I'm asking for your opinion, I guess, probably writing more than, is, what do you think we're going with this, I mean,
I think we've got to meet the customer where they are, which is such a cliche.
right,
But if
you got the under 65 and
so got to think of,
we're dying, and so the other ones are coming in, so where's the customer going?
So you got to think, I had that on my last slide, but I'll jump to it. I think you got to think about lifetime customer value.
Right.
I think you've got to be ready and prepared and embrace change. And it's why he likes to say, when he puts it in, he's amazed at how quickly people do find a way around it, right? You talked about how people adopt and adapt to booking online. I think you've got to continue to move forward. But at the same time that you're doing that, I think you've got to be mindful of what your culture is, what your customer base is, and make sure you've got a safety net for those that aren't willing to go there. That's my opinion.
Well, these dynamics, as people age, do you think that these dynamics will stay?
Yeah.
So as people age and they get retired and have more free time, they'll want to stay and talk?
I think
Versus the ones who are so busy, they just want in and out?
I think that we've read a couple generations of digital natives that are looking for experiences that are more frictionless. So I think my prediction is that as time goes by, this will retract. The folks that want the high touch will retract. However, at the same time that I say that, and I'm not just saying it because I'm a researcher and I measure people's perceptions and attitudes, I think you got to know who you're serving. Because at the same time that I say that, I'll tell this story. It's one of my favorites when I was running, marketing research for golf digest companies. How many of you guys remember Ty Tryon? He's kind of, So Ty Tryon was being positioned as kind of this, new cutting edge. He was Ricky Fowler before he was Ricky Fowler. That's how I said it. And Ty Tryon, we had a cover image that we were going to use Ty with his hat on backwards, and he was just looking real grunge. We put it in front of a lot of younger people. They were like, "Well, he's cool, but I see that in my other life. When I play golf, I want this more reverential experience." So I think, while I believe that this will shrink, you got to keep measuring it. You got to see what your customer wants, because there's a certain aspirational component of golf that still remains.
I put in my notes that Jonathan from 10-4, he brought it up. Why don't I try a kiosk in your pro shop? I'm going to try that. See who walks towards that and give them an outlet. Yeah.
Could you look at that and interpret that in one way, that offers think of the check-in as a pain point?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it kind of feeds very nicely into the next slide, because, when you think about customer service, people who enjoy personal attention in the golf center, their home course, obviously the majority of folks view that sentiment. But again, if you look at the little breakouts here by, age, one of the segmentation filters, you can see that it's not as clear cut. To your point, Whitey, I mean, after a long day, I don't necessarily want to talk to someone. I want to just get out there and play.
Do you see?
Yeah, please get that thing.
No, do you see, so both these two slides, I feel like they're kind of driven around the reduction of labor and therefore the replacement of labor with automation and kiosks versus the reallocation of labor. So isn't there a vision where you can, you take someone out of the golf shop and you have a kiosk, that person doesn't have to be eliminated. That person can create a different service experience at a different point.
That's where I hope we can feel that we need to go.
And the same thing with autonomous mowers, right? It's not necessarily labor savings, it's a reallocation.
It's a
of what
reallocation.
details are they taking.
Exactly. It's creating and putting people in the most cost-effective operating model, but at the same time, also the most customer-centric model. And finding that balance is what, is our big challenge.
Same time, if that guy's trying to check in 12 people, he's not got time to sell them a shirt.
Right, or maybe somebody out there is going to do
So
that.
if they're checking in there, he's got time to work the crowd and sell them something.
Yeah, in the retail side of it, again, not to go into it, but I got a lot of, having run that part of the business from PGA back earlier in my career, there's so many components about personalization versus automatic. Upselling is something that the golf shop staff, particularly again, if you look at buying behaviors, again, this is going to some work that we've done. There's this great slide that we once put up there about how men shop versus how women shop. When we saw women when they shop, they like it was like this whole spaghetti lines. They went from here to there, and guys just kind of in and out. But when you did it in the college shop, it was totally different. Let me move on to a couple other things and we'll continue to ask questions along the way. So how are golfers going to be interacting using technology? So we asked a basic question here about what golfers are using. And obviously, smartphones are ubiquitous, seeing significantly less adoption through smartwatches and activity trackers. And then we asked what they brought out of the golf course and what's out there. And again, the phone is just predominant. I'm going to show you some really interesting statistics in a few moments about the opportunity for golf carts, smart golf carts, because that's where it seems to be. But this kind of surprised me a little bit too, again, being in my own little bubble, right? I mean, like, how could you not be using a rangefinder? How could you not be, out there using in-cart GPS? Again, think about this from a broader perspective, how we ask this question. And, this is across the broader definition of who a golfer is. So who are you catering to at your facility? If I did this just at high-end LPs or private clubs or those people who maintain a handicap, we have very different data.
I agree, the $250 course is gonna see a lot more data and a lot more usage of some of the stuff, and maybe the more basic course is gonna be, they're gonna be more interested in the social aspect of that, as opposed to the hardcore.
Very good.
Yeah, how's the implementation of all this tech affected the pace of play?
That's a great question. And it's gotten a lot better now that we have passive data collection. I remember a study that we did not long ago for a significant player in this space, the tech space, where we did what we call an on-course ethnography. Big fancy research term used to follow golfers around and ask questions as they went. And we had a lot of frustration back, 3-4 years ago when you had to enter all this information yourself, that it was disrupting, what they were out there to do. Now, I'd love to kind of run it up against actual base play data. I haven't done that. We have to collect that. But I would maintain that while it has gotten better, it's still a big option. So what are they using it for? You can look at this slide and take it two ways. First thing you can think about is, wow, none of these applications are penetrating 50% plus of golfers. That shouldn't be a bad thing because it's more fragmented again in terms of what people are using. I think the half-whole way to look at this is that you've got, for most of these, fairly sizable segments of golfers that are using this technology on the golf course. And again, it kind of comes back to understanding who your customer base is and having the right availability of different technological solutions that they can choose to use if they see fit. Now I'm going to White's favorite slide, one that totally surprised us right given this conversation. Sorry to be jumping around a little bit. We're definitely seeing, computers and at-home usage, particularly the TechCon booking. But we asked a big question that I know was on GCO's mind going into this about whether people were amenable to putting down an advanced deposit. The comfort level in that is largely correlated with golfer age, like so many other things. But you got nearly 3/4 that say that they are comfortable. That's surprising.
Do you guys believe that?
No.
That's the first thing I said in town. I can't believe that. If it's even remotely true, let's say it's even 60%. What?
Let me tell you why I believe it is true. And because we're seeing it in other sectors.
John, just 1 minute. You're saying a deposit without full prepaid, right?
Isn't that the golf now model? You gotta put down, they're gonna charge you something when you book $2.
They do.
Some,
It's like they're-
it's subjectively interpreted.
golf
But
contract.
here's why I believe, besides that, here's why I believe that there's some veracity to this. And that is because think about other leisure categories, this has become standard operating procedure. If I'm buying tickets for a sporting event, if I'm booking a cruise, I'm being asked to put money down. Now, again, I'm not here telling every one of you that doubts this, that you should immediately implement this policy at your facility.
I am. I think that's crazy.
I think you need to experiment. You need to try it.
Yeah, that's a crazy numbers.
I think that we may be very pleasantly surprised if people realize this is a cost of doing business. But again, if the facility down the street isn't doing it, maybe, you know, who's gonna blink first?
A show of hands, how many hold the credit card to hold the tea time at your facility or a deposit? Roughly, less than half,
I
maybe.
think you gotta ask that in 3 different questions.
Very
So-
nice.
How many hold a credit card, how many take a deposit, and how many prepay? That's 3 different questions.
But I think all of them represent a risk to the customer.
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking is, what are the risks as a customer to make that tea time?
So here's what I want to do, and because I'm up here talking, I really want somebody to memorialize what we just discussed, you know, these questions,
Yeah, I elect you,
and give them to us.
I elect you to be the one that memorializes.
No, I nominate. What I want to be able to do is I want to ask that pulse and see what everybody thinks from the spot side. Oh, Bruce?
What percentage of golf now customers do not pay something in advance?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd love to know it.
0.
I should ask that to you.
Everybody pays.
Everybody.
Do they sell a reasonable amount of tee times? Yeah.
That's how you get the deal.
So.
No, anything, even they just book on your course, not even a deal, you're putting a deposit down.
I would know nothing.
Oh, you're putting a
Yeah.
deposit or you're paying a fee?
They pay 20% of the fee up front, and they get it 100% of the time, and they sell a few tee times, so.
If you don't throw, they got it.
No, we're getting close to time here. I want to get through a couple other things that I think you'll find interesting. Because one of the real opportunities that we found is golf carts. Okay, now these next two slides may seem counterintuitive, but again, we'll explain why they're not. We asked people about their interest levels in a variety of different tech solutions within the golf cart. And you look at this, and pretty much all of them generate, you know, a fair amount of interest. Doesn't mean they're all going to necessarily use them. But to have that available, you know, again, leads me to believe, because the phone's in the pocket and everything else is elsewhere, the golf cart has more accessibility. Now, the point that seems counterintuitive to that is when we ask people whether golf carts offer more technology than this, and a majority do agree with that. But again, I don't think that's how, that means getting to go back to this. They're not going to use them all. Yeah, maybe there's more than they want to use, but they still want to have choices. That's how I read this.
But is that technology for the operator or for the consumer?
Well,
The operator has a real need
right.
for pace of play, for all these different things, whereas the consumer doesn't think about that at all.
Well, and the basic play can largely operate in the shadows in the background. They don't necessarily need to know that that's being tracked. I believe, and I thought the point was made articulated very well in the last section, I think you've got to collect as much data as you can, as long as you have the ability to parse it and to use it. As a custom researcher, you know, my thing, and we've done this with casinos for years, is you've got to marry that behavioral data with attitudinal data, and that's when you get the really good insights. So, you know, you were able to, and are able to go out there and not only find out whether people root for the Jets or the Giants, so that they can come up with the right tickets, but we also find out how that may correlate to whether they're winning or losing at the blackjack table. So that can be, you know, if you apply it in a golf scenario, you can look at it even from how people play versus their spending habits. Really interesting. This is maybe out of school. We track player satisfaction for all the USGA's national championships. And one of the things that struck me that we started measuring this year, because I've measured it for other professional sports, is the impact of not just how people perform, but how they perform relative to their expectations of how they perform on satisfaction and on other behaviors. And it's still early in the analytical process, so we've looked at it for professional sports teams, and there is a huge correlation between them. So here's and again, it's important to think about how one performs versus expectation, and I'll give you the perfect example from my own personal experience. My favorite football team is the biggest laughing stock in the NFL right now, the Tennessee Titans. Just fired our coach this week, we're 1-5. I was happy when the Cardinals gave away that game a couple of weeks ago, because my expectation was that they weren't going to win that. Being 1-5 right now is pretty much where I thought we'd be. If you're a fan of the Buffalo Bills, you're probably not happy being 4-2. So anyway, a bit of a digression, but understanding that component to something to look at. Infrastructure difficulties in terms of how golfers obtain their yardages, thought it was interesting to kind of see where people want to get that information. So we asked that as well. You can see that again, there's a little bit of a demographic shift. Final moments, I want to jump ahead to the last slide, the implication slide, and I want to get Whitey to kind of weigh in on his overall assessment. These are the three main points that, maybe I started with and began and I want to conclude with right here. Tech's not going away. The fact that you guys are here is further evidence of the fact that we need to embrace it. We need to move forward on it. We need to do it on our own terms. We need to look at it to the point I think Jeff made a moment ago. You got to look at the cost benefit. You got to look at how that impacts every aspect of your operation. Find the right solution that's going to enhance your revenues and make you more operationally efficient. Talk about the tech stack being the holy grail. So we got to that a little bit earlier. And the final part is just recognizing that the customer is an individual. You've got to meet them on their own terms. You've got to understand what they want at your facility relative to what they're getting elsewhere. And you also have to think about, as I said, the reason why you still have to be bullish on all of this, because it's not going away and the next generations are native to it and they're going to move forward. So while you have to protect your current market share and your current profitability to customers, you have to also be there for those that are hoping to be your customers for a lot longer than some that might have a lot of.
I think you brought up a good point about, is this what the customers want or is this what the operators want? And that's what I struggle with when we're coming up with the presentation and the comments on it. All the things behind the scenes that I'm dealing with, and we're doing a beverage station out there, a machine that's going to dispense beer with your ID. You put it in there, and there's nobody there. So we got that going on too. There's just so many things that are piling up, but they're all operationally behind the scenes. It's going to affect the customers when they are able to get a beer at 9 o'clock when the beverage card isn't out there.
What's the efficacy of all this tech, and who's going to fix it all? Number one, what's the timeline that you're down for revenue? Number two, and I've got a really big question on your automated ball picker. Has the U.S. military contacted you for all the kids that aren't going to join the military after they've been hit constantly by range balls over the year?
One of those kids, actually.
That's the second time it's been brought up as a labor. And if you're doing automation, be ready to answer these questions, because every comment I've had so far about that when they see the automated range picker and the automated the robot mowing the range is, well, you get rid of jobs? No. And in this room, I think we all have an idea of how those jobs are going to change to maybe more of a labor-intensive job that's going to be beautifying and reinforced in other ways. But I suspect my labor bill is going to stay somewhat the same, just that we're going to have a different looking course at the end of the year.
But if you can pick automatically and cut automatically, your range is now open more. Therefore, you have more revenue coming in, more hours you need to work. So your labor. Personally, I don't need 5 kids standing around with one picker to,
It's horrible.
pick
They
up
run
golf balls.
hot. Everybody knows it.
That's going to go down. But do I still need them there to sell the golf balls, or even give them the option between putting it in the vending machine or paying in person? We're testing that right now.
You can certainly measure that. I mean, I'm a big fan, and we do some of our other work, of controlled experiments. Test, see what happens when you do, see what happens when you don't, track that and do it in a way that's not going to jeopardize, the overall operation. But I'd also like to believe that the redeployment of some of these resources, you talked about it on the agronomic side, could be
I
really.
still need someone to put the buckets up because customers aren't going to bring back.
Yeah, I think, so we're at a club, I'm in a private club, and we are a big adopter of automation. We've done mowers, we've done pickers, we've done service, we've done wherever, but I think at any point, if we ever, when we talk to our membership, say it's about labor savings, we're going the wrong, none of this should be driven around labor savings. It's what else can we do, and can I take those, young, workers, right? And can I get more touch points on the range, right? And they're clean clubs and heads to walk the range, but all of a sudden now they have time in the moment, and it goes back to that touch side. And then as far as who's going to repair some of these items, to me that goes into, it's just like the point of sale conversation. You don't have that partnership with your provider who they know the importance of it, with wrong automation. Like we push that hard. It's like listen, this is only if you can turn this around in this amount of time, otherwise this partnership.
You raise a really good point. I mean, again, as somebody that always tries to see our role as being a voice of the consumer and collecting that. I had a unique experience recently, 3 years ago, joining a private club that I worked at as a wall picker and club cleaner and range worker when I was a kid. And, I made a point of getting to know the guys that are in that, role right now to see how that's evolved over time too. These guys, maybe it's because I've reached out to them and, wanting to share with them, but they have become more customer facing. They have become more social. They've become more involved in the holistic experience of the members of the club. Now, again, it's one isolated place. It's a higher end club where there probably are more high touch people than most. But I find it really nice to see the level of service that this role is now providing when 4 years ago, I was doing something very different. Yes, Mike.
One question regarding the use of GPS functionality in the cars. Did you make a differentiation between golf clubs that give the golfer introduction and those who don't? Because most golf clubs, to me, it's like, taking a rental car, here's the key, good luck.
We didn't ask it to dig that deeply, but I would surmise that where you're going with that is absolutely correct. Two people know how to most efficiently use that. And again, it's interesting because we've done a lot of work with some of the solutions out there that do that. And I used to collect yardage books. Yeah, I know I'm strange. That's why I went up where I was.
So John, it's the striking that balance between high touch, high tech's fascinating topic, right? I'm just curious, and you've spent a lot of time thinking about it to prepare for today and studying it pretty intentionally. Like, who do you come back to? Which organization in golf or otherwise? Like, who do you come back to that you think of that organization is doing that?
Doing the answering of that.
Striking yeah, just for you personally, like who do you, when you're thinking about this, you're looking around.
I think there's
that
a role
group does
for
it.
for all the organizations that do it. I think, obviously I begin with the PGA professional because that's where I began my career. And I know and remember that badge head where all the hats that PGA professional wears. I also look at this organization because they're setting the tone for how a facility is supposed to efficiently operated. I even look at the USGA in terms of how they, who's a client of ours as well, and how they've become much more willing to listen and facilitate this democratization of the game. So that's kind of my way of hedging a little bit because we work for all these organizations. And part of the work that we do, not just here, but for them, is hopefully getting them to that place.
Okay, and see, I took that question to be what organization or industry is the best one to look at to be adapting to this?
Either or, I was curious, who gets your attention?
I think I've seen it very well implemented in the airline industry. We work, full disclosure, Airlines for America's client. I've seen it work fairly well in the cruise line industry. And, fair disclosure, we work in that sector, and I used to run marketing for a cruise line. In the 2 years I spent outside of the golf industry. I think those are really good examples. And then obviously I always go back to the casino industry because they are the greatest example right now of having huge amounts of data that they harness well and deploy in ways that touch the customer. Getting hooks on it.
Yeah.